and welcome back to Neo Psychology with me, your teacher, Mr. Neo, the channel where I teach online psychology lessons for my wonderful students. Today we're carrying on with the unit of social influence and we're looking at lesson 2, conformity, types and explanations. Let's get started. So, have you ever been to one of those fairs or one of those events, and they usually run for charity, and they've got a big jar of sweets or coins or beans, and then you need to guess how many are in there? Okay, have a look at the beans in the jar without discussing it with anyone else. Write down an estimate of how many beans you think are in the jar. What do you think would be the likely behavior based on not knowing or based on asking such an ambiguous question where nobody's really sure how many beans or jelly beans or sweets are in the jar? That's what we're going to look at today. So, you learned about conformity in our previous lesson. Ash looked at a number of different factors that affect how much we conform. In today's lesson, we will look at some more explanations for why people conform. We will start by looking at different types of conformity. So, let's start with types of conformity. Don't get confused between types of conformity and explanations for conformity. These are two separate things, two different things that you could be asked in the exam. Let's start with types of conformity. Herbert Kellman in 1958 suggested that there are 3 types of conformity in which people change to the opinion of a majority: compliance, identification, and internalization. Let's start with compliance. Compliance is a temporary agreement, a low level of conformity. Compliance involves going along with others in public, but privately not changing opinions or behaviors. This results in only a superficial change, and the opinion or behavior stops as soon as group pressure ceases. Okay? For example, you might say that you like dubstep music because many other people in your class like dubstep music and you wish to fit in. However, privately, you dislike that style of music. Compliance is a temporary agreement. It's a low level of conformity. Another type of conformity is identification. You value the group. This is a middle level of conformity. When we identify with a group that we value, we want to become part of it. So we publicly change our opinions and behaviors, even if we don't privately agree with everything the group stands for. So for example, a person may decide to become a vegetarian because all of his new flatmates are vegetarian. However, whenever he walks past the McDonald's, he can't resist a Big Mac, and when he is away from his flatmates, he still eats meat. This is identification, right? It's about valuing the group. I want to be part of the group. I want to fit in. This is a middle level of conformity. The final type of conformity is internalization. You think the group is actually correct, and this is the deepest level of conformity. When a person genuinely accepts group norms, it results in a private as well as public change of opinions or behaviors. The change is usually permanent and persist in the absence of group members because attitudes have become part of the person, of how the person thinks. It has been internalized. You have taken it physically on board. For example, if an individual is influenced by a group of Buddhists and converts to this faith, then the new religious way of life will continue without the presence of the group, and they have internalized this belief. Okay, that's internalization. They think the group is correct, and it's the deepest level of conformity. So, can you identify which type of conformity, compliance, identification, or internalization, is being described in each scenario below? Liz is by nature a smart dresser, but she wears jeans and a sweater to work on Dress Down Friday because she doesn't want to give the impression of being standoffish to her work colleagues who she likes. What type of conformity is that? That is identification. You want to fit in with the group. Lewis is eating alone at a sushi restaurant. Although he finds eating with chopsticks rather tedious and inconvenient, he uses them because he feels too awkward to ask for a fork. What's this one? That is compliance. Hasa puts some money in a charity box even though she doesn't particularly agree with the cause because she feels uncomfortable walking past the collector in the local small supermarket. That is also compliance, right? Identification has to do with the group, trying to fit in with the group. Len slows down to 30 miles an hour as soon as he reaches that speed zone because he believes it is wrong to drive faster than that in a built-up area. What type of conformity? That is internalization. Winston is visiting the UK from the US. At a concert, he stands for the national anthem because he doesn't want to upset his hosts. That is identification, trying to fit in with the group. Jack is also on a solo visit to London for the day. At a pedestrian crossing, everyone suddenly surges across as soon as there's a gap in the traffic, even though the lights are red. Jack follows, feeling uncomfortable but too embarrassed to be the only one not to cross. Compliance. Jenny is at a local restaurant with 5 of her friends. They all say go on, try it, after they have all ordered an unusual spicy dish. In the chef's recommendation, she follows suit because she doesn't want to look unadventurous in front of her friends. Identification. Okay, those are types of conformity. Can you identify one thing you've learned about the types of conformity? Why do you think learning about types of conformity is important? What was the hardest part to understand about types of conformity? And what questions has types of conformity raised for you? If you have any questions, feel free to write them in the comments. I'm sure other people will answer them. And that's lesson objective 1 complete. Let's now have a look at explanations for conformity. Now, informational social influence, ISI, is about information, a desire to be right. Often, we are uncertain about what behavior or beliefs are right or wrong. You may not know the answer to a question in class, but if most of the class give an answer, you go along with them because you feel they are probably right. Informational social influence is a cognitive process. People generally want to be right. Informational social influence leads to internalization, okay? You want to be correct. You want to have the right answer. Informational social influence occurs in situations that are ambiguous. So, informational social influence is most likely in situations which are new or where there is some ambiguity. You're not sure. It isn't clear what is right. It may happen when decisions have to be made quickly, when we assume the group is likely to be correct. Right, I'm going to conform with the group because I'm not sure what the right thing to do is, and I think what they're doing is probably correct. So therefore, that is informational social influence. I'm doing what I think is correct or what I think everyone else thinks is correct. Normative social influence is about norms, a desire to behave like others and not look foolish. Normative social influence concerns what is normal behavior for a social group, i.e. norms. Norms regulate the behavior of groups and individuals. Normative social influence is an emotional rather than a cognitive process. People prefer social approval rather than rejection. Normative social influence leads to compliance. So, informational social influence is doing what you think is actually correct. I don't know the answer. The answer is quite ambiguous. I'm going to go with what the group thinks because I think that the group is correct. Normative social influence is not about what you think is correct. You're doing what the group is doing because you don't want to stand out. It's an emotional process, all right? I don't want to stand out. I don't want to look like a fool, so I'm just going to do what everyone else is doing. That is normative social influence. Normative social influence occurs in unfamiliar situations and with people you know. Normative social influence is most likely in situations where you don't know the norms and look to others about how to behave. Normative social influence occurs in situations with strangers if you don't want to be rejected, or with people we know because we are concerned about the social approval of friends. It may be more pronounced in stressful situations where people have a need for social support. Here's a quick question. Conformity at sixth form. It is Oliver and Lola's first day at sixth form, and they are keen to make a good impression. Oliver pretends to be interested in other students' conversations, even though he really finds them boring. Lola watches other students very carefully because she wants to complete her work just like they do, to avoid making any mistakes. whose behavior is being influenced by informational social influence and whose is being influenced by normative social influence. Have a little think, pause the video, write your answer down. Don't just watch it, write it. Interact with these lessons, please. Yes? Right. Pause it, write your answer down now. I'm going to go through the answer now. Now, Lola's behavior is being influenced by informational social influence. By observing the other students' behavior and doing her work as they do, she believes she can avoid making mistakes. Presumably, the reason she believes this is because she thinks they know better than her how to do the work, or they understand it better. She behaves as they do because she wants her work to be correct like theirs is. However, Oliver's behavior is being influenced by normative social influence. Even though he finds the other students boring, he is prepared to pretend to find their conversations interesting. He goes along with the norm of the group, which states, this is the sort of thing we talk about. Presumably this is because he does not want to look foolish or impolite or to be rejected by the group. Yeah, it's an emotional process. He may even wish to be liked by the other students or to get their approval. And those are explanations for conformity. Can you identify one thing you've learned about the explanations of conformity? Why do you think learning about this is important? What was the hardest part to understand about explanations of conformity? And what questions has this raised for you? That's learning objective 2 done. We are moving on to learning objective 3 to discuss and evaluate types and explanations of conformity. Are there any strengths and limitations to this? Is there any supporting or refuting evidence? Let's have a look. There is supporting evidence for normative social influence. Ash found many people conformed rather than give the correct answer because they were afraid of disapproval. When participants wrote down answers, so there was no normative pressure, conformity fell to only 12.5%. This shows that at least some conformity is due to a desire not to be rejected by the group for disagreeing with them. So Ash's research that we learned last lesson supports normative social influence. There is also supporting evidence for informational social influence. Lucas et al. Found participants conformed more to incorrect answers when math problems were difficult. For harder problems, the situation was ambiguous or unclear, so they relied on the answers they were given. This supports informational social influence because the results are what informational social influence would predict. You go with the answer of what you think is correct. It's a cognitive process. So again, supporting evidence is another strength. There is also real-life application of normative social influence being used. Normative beliefs have an important role in shaping behaviours such as smoking and energy conservation. Linkenbach and Perkins in 2003 found that adolescents exposed to the message that the majority of their peers did not smoke were less likely to take up smoking themselves. This supports the claim that people shape their behaviour out of a desire to fit in with their reference group. This is a strength. So, can you summarize each evaluative point into your own words? If you're trying to think hard, can you summarize the evaluative points into exactly 10 words? Give that a go now, please. And that was the evaluation. Learning objective 3 is complete. And that was lesson 2, conformity, types and explanations. Next lesson, we got lesson 3, conformity to social roles. And there we go. There's the lesson done. Well done, my neuropsychologist. Great job today. God bless and peace.
I'm feeling like Will. I feel like a prince. I'm feeling myself. I'm loaded with bills. Cause I wasn't blessed with no Uncle Phil. Don't know how it feels. I wanted to flex. They told me to chill. I'm making a flip. My life is a flick. Now load up the film.